Shalom, peace and blessings, everybody. Thank you for watching. We're here from Universal God Message of Peace. I'm Lale Tunser. This is Rabbi Wiseman. And this week we're going to be talking about how we can transform our greed. And Rabbi Wiseman's going to start. So over to you, Rabbi Wiseman. Please share with us your wisdom on this topic.
Okay. I don't know if I have wisdom on the topic, but I'll share what I have. Um, so the way that I deal with these topics is I kind of run them around in my head for a couple of days, and then I see what comes up. And so I sat on Shabbat and I kind of closed my eyes and waited for waited for wisdom to rise in my head. And the image that came to my mind was the image of the death of Alexander the Great. So the Talmud says that Alexander the Great was buried with two holes in the side of his coffin, right? For his arms to stick out like this, because his hands were stuck like this, still asking for more. So that he was that he died asking for, and then I was thinking, so so I was thinking about this gesture. And I suddenly remembered, I suddenly remembered my daughter as a baby. And I think the first gesture my daughter made was this, right? Was this. And it meant, give me, give me. So I thought, that's interesting. So it so happened that in the afternoon, I went back to synagogue and there was a baby there. There's a baby there, and I observed the baby a little bit. And at one point, the baby wanted something, and the baby went like this, right? And I thought to myself, so this is part of, I guess, what Muslims would call the fitra of being a human being, is that we have desire. Right. It's from the very moment we're born, right? My daughter, when she was born, the moment she was born, she started to look to eat. That was we're born with desire. We're born with wanting and needs. And that's really part of the human experience. And what we call greed, um, is the kind of runaway train version of what is part of life. And I was thinking, uh, you know, I, I think that the Eastern religions deal with this problem in a very different way, right? So the Buddha, when he was sitting under the tree, realized, right, the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, right? So um, the first one is that all of life is suffering. The second is that the cause of suffering is desire, and the third is that desire can be ended, and fourth, the pathway, the eightfold path to nullifying desire. And that idea of nullifying desire, I think, is kind of the Eastern approach, right? The Eastern approach is to try to nullify desire. Now, I don't know that that ever really happens. Okay, so in order to do that, right, that involves a lot of asceticism, right? Trying to, distance yourself from worldly life, to live in caves and to hang around in cremation grounds and things like that in order to distance yourself from any kind of attachment to the world. Um, and I'm not sure it works. I was I was thinking to myself of having gone in in Varanasi in Benares in India. There's a place that's famous for agoris. Agoris are ascetics who distance themselves from any kind of desire, any kind of wanting. And the way they do this is they sit in cremation grounds, and they make these huts made out of bones, human bones, right? Or they sit on platforms made out of human bones. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, they had to go collect those bones, like, and I imagine they fought over those bones. No, no, that's a really good bone. I'm taking that bone. No, 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 that's my bone, right? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that like there's no greed there. It's just a different kind of greed. So I think that that is one that's I feel like that is a I feel like that may be a dead end, to be truthful. That the idea that um, we're going to curtail our greed for this world by curtailing all sense of desire, I think is unlikely, right? I think is unlikely. The Abrahamic approach um, is to elevate our desires. Is to say, listen, we know that as a human being, we have desire. We're born like this. Okay? We're born like this, right? And some of us, right? And poor Alexander the Great, he died like that, right? Now that's not a good thing, right? If you're born like this, that's okay. But you don't want to necessarily die like this. So we have to he didn't find a way to handle, right, his desire for the world. He didn't find a way to handle it. So he's still asking, even as in the last moment of his life, he's still asking more, 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 more. We don't want to do that. But we have to recognize that this is part of us. And to learn how to deal with it and to understand that there's an incredible value in it.
Mm.
That you know the Talmud talks about this. And when it talks about the creation of the world. At one point, God says that every day is tov. It's good, right?
Mhm.
This day is good, this day is good, this day is good. And one day he says it's tov ma'od, it's very good. So the rabbis ask, what is the ma'od? What is the very? Like, what's very about this day? And they say, well, the very this is the day that God created our Yetzer Hara. This is the day that God created our nafs. The God created our our negative side.
Mhm.
And they say, well, okay. So how can it be that the negative side is being called Tov Ma'od? How can it be that our greed for the world is being called Tov Ma'od, very good? So the rabbis answer, because if you didn't have it, you
Mhm.
would do nothing. If
Yeah.
you didn't have it, right, nobody would ever have children. If you didn't have it, nobody would ever build a house. If you didn't have it, the world would never get built. And that's why we're here. We're here as God's vice regents on earth. And so the juice the juice that allows us to be able to do our job on earth is the fact that we want things, the fact that
Mhm.
we have that desire. And so it's not a question of getting rid of it because that's not even desirable, right? It would not be a good thing for all of us to be living in huts made out of skulls. Okay, that would not the world. That's not what the God envisioned for the world. Okay, although I am kind of enjoying the thought of Lale living in a hut made out of skulls. But okay, I'm just gonna erase that for a second. Coco would probably really enjoy it, you know, lots of bones. But that's not the world is supposed to be. The world is not, we're not supposed to be living in the world without any passion. We're not supposed to be living in the world uh without any desire and need. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. So we have to learn how to elevate it. And honestly, I think the simplest thing is like to want is to refine our wants,
Mhm.
is to refine our wants. And it's like with food, it's like with food. We're going to have a desire for food. There's no question we're going to have a desire for food. Everybody has a desire for food,
Mhm.
right? The question is, do we desire only to eat pizza? That's me. That'd be me. Do we desire only to eat pizza, right? Or do we desire to eat foods which are healthy for us? To eat things which are nutritious and which are going to contribute to our health. And it's possible to refine it's possible to refine your desires so that you're wanting the things, so that you're wanting things which are good for you. That you're wanting things and you're wanting things in a measure which is good for you, right? Because part of greed is qualitative and part of it is quantitative. So the qualitative part is, you know, are we wanting the right things, right? Are we being discriminating about the things that we want? And second, are we being discriminating in the extent to which we want them? And the second one is actually very hard. The second one is very hard. And it's partially hard because of the way that we are wired up. Um, our neurology, now I'm gonna get scientific. Okay, so okay. So our neurology is kind of wired that virtually everything we do is tied into a system in an internal system of reward, right? They call it the dopamine system, right? So I have my phone here, right? Here's my phone. See, look how nice that is. Okay. Um, see, two people hugging. It's a sweet phone. Um, but I have my phone. So every time that I press my phone, right? Every time that I press the button on my phone and something happens, I get a little squirt of dopamine. Okay, I get a reward. Okay, a little squirt of dopamine that goes into my dopamine receptors, the very same receptors, by the way, in which opiate drugs are received in your body. Okay, so there's a kind of relationship there between. So we're addicted to getting what we want. Okay, we're that's part of being a human being, part of our the way that we're built is we're addicted to what getting what we want. And the more we get what we want, right, the more satisfaction we get out of it. Okay? And we see this um it's not just with human beings, but with some animals. Some animals will eat themselves to death, right? They will literally eat themselves to death, right? Which means that the reward response, oh, I found mangoes. Okay, how yay yay yay! I found mangoes. Obviously, if you're an animal, and it's mangoes are great, right? You could eat yourself, you eat mangoes until you die, right? It's possible to do that. Um, and the same thing with the human being, right? I find mangoes, I find good mangoes in the market. Oh, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna eat mangoes. Instead of eating one mango, I'm gonna eat two mangoes and three mangoes and 10 mangoes. And finally I'm eating 12 mangoes. And I'm gonna eat until I make myself sick. And then say to myself, why was I so greedy? Why did I do that? Well, the reason for that is because my brain kept telling me, wow, you found mangoes. And you better eat them now because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow there may not be any more mangoes, right? Because that's kind of how our deep brain thinks. Um, so part of it is we have to kind of we have to wrestle with our own neurology. We have to wrestle with this very deep sense, right? That begins like this with little babies, right? And can end like this, right? With still wanting, right? Even in our last moments, we have to sort of be conscious of that process, right? Be conscious of that process and say, okay, this is what's going on in my brain. This is my reward centers are now activated, right? And I am getting what I want. And when I get what I want, right, my brain says, let's get more of what we want, right? And at some point, I have to say, maybe that's not good for me, right? I have to say, this is where I know where this goes, right? I know where this goes. I use my higher mind, my seichel, my akal, right? My intellect, and I say, okay, this is the place where I stop, and then I can elevate the greed, right? That's in terms of quantity. In terms of quality, it's really it's a little more subtle. I mean, to think about, to really spend some time thinking about what you really want. Very often, I think our greed is for things which are unworthy. And somewhere inside of us is a higher desire that we
Mhm.
haven't recognized yet. I think very often, I mean, just give an example, we'll talk about lust another time, but I think very often when people experience lust, what they really want is love,
Mm.
right? And it's but their brain translates in that way. There's a kind of a greediness to it. And instead of kind of like looking at it and saying, okay, so what is it that I really want? It kind of gets translated in that. And I think the same way happens, I think, um, with physical things, where people feel an emptiness inside themselves, right? They feel an emptiness inside themselves and they want to fill it with something. So they think, well, this is a world full of stuff, so I'm going to fill it with stuff. I'm going to fill it with things. And you know, it doesn't really work. So better to refine your desire and say, no, let me fill up with things which are important to me. Let me fill up with things which will actually satisfy me, right? With relationships, with having people, having people who I care about and who care about me. With helping others, with spending time with God, with all sorts of things which can be much more satisfying than just acquiring a lot of stuff. So I think I just rattled on for half an hour. So, um,
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Rabbi Wiseman, sharing all that amazing wisdom with us. I think that was really good. Um, I had some questions, but I think you've answered them. So what you're basically saying is that it's really difficult to completely eradicate that desire of greed, and that it's innate within every single human. Even when we're born, it's there. Um, and instead of trying to get rid of it, we should perhaps look at elevating it, refining it, or transforming it. And the way to do that is to question ourselves, sort of, what do we understand as success? What do we really want? Um, and go beneath the layers of, the greed that we feel, to try and understand or transform or recognize the higher level of greed that's more sort of what we really want. Is that what you're trying to say? And
but
actually, sorry, go on.
yeah, I think it's exactly what you said was exactly right. To to find what we really want,
Mm.
and what we really need, and what's really good for us.
Mm.
Um,
And so, because so many times we don't think about this, we don't make time. You need to make time to reflect in order to ask these questions for yourself and to try and seek the answers. But I think so many of us are sort of in this rat race of work, 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 because, since a young age, society has told us, our families have told us that, what really is of value is success and houses and cars and monetary things, gold and silver. And this is so we spend our whole lives choosing to spend our time, um, chasing after those things. But how many times do we reach what we have a goal in our mind, we're going to get this house or this car, and we get there, and then actually it doesn't really bring us inner peace. It might bring us that quick dopamine or, effect, a bit of a brief satisfaction, like all the things that we chase after in this physical world, really. But unless we really question why we're doing it, and is that the real true success, um, it's really difficult. I think we need to make time to self-reflect, be disciplined in reflecting and sort of meditating on these things, trying to be mindful. And I guess through being grateful, I guess gratitude, let's work on our gratitude and our kindness, because that's like the opposite force of greed, isn't it? And actually, if we choose to put value on these attributes, let's say if we choose to put value on the attributes of being a good human being, you know, and being somebody who's able to love unconditionally without expecting return, being able to treat others how we want to be treated ourselves. Unless we put value to these things because they help our relationships, which really is the most important thing, really. You know, how many of us have lost relationships because of our greed? How many of us end up causing division in the world? There's all this war and everything going on, and it's because of greed for money, wealth, you know, these physical things. But imagine if we were greedy for knowledge and wisdom and understanding. Imagine if we were greedy to become a better version of ourselves. Imagine if we were greedy to have peaceful relationships. The only way we can be greedy for that is if we choose to. Why would we choose to? That's why we need to use our intellect and think, well, why would I choose to? I think there's a lot of wisdom in why we should choose those things over, you know, the material things which we chase after. And you know, King Solomon, he prayed for knowledge and wisdom, didn't he, instead of silver and gold, and God gave him everything. Because we can, you know, we can even serve God through the physical things. And I think perhaps that is the higher desire within that desire. We think it's because we're doing it for us, but actually, perhaps it's okay to chase after those things with the desire to use them in the way of God, and to use them to show gratitude to God by sharing them with other people, by giving to charity, by using them to build, you know, peace really in the world. But it's so easy to say and it's so difficult to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, it's very difficult to do.
But I think we all have to be greedy for something. I'm greedy. Mm.
You have to be. I mean, listen. We also have to realize that we are. I mean, we live in a world. It's especially those of us who live here we live in the Western world, if you want to call it that. I mean, we live in a world that is propelled by greed. I mean, it is like, it's like the petrol that runs everything, right? I mean, we're bombarded by advertisements, 24, I forget how many advertisements the average person sees every day, but it's in the many hundreds, right? We're bombarded by advertisements constantly telling us what are things that we don't have that we need, right? And it's part of the way that we're raised, it's part of our societies, it's part of the world that, you're in this constant need. The Talmud says that, he says no person dies with half their desires fulfilled, right? Because every time you get what you want, right, you want something else. And that's part of the dopamine system, right? All drugs work that way, right? You know, once you get used to a certain level, right, you need the next level, right? You don't get the high anymore, so you need more, so you keep upping the ante, and it doesn't work, right? It doesn't achieve anymore. See these
Why
poor
don't we
celebrities.
instead just why don't we just choose what we're going to get that dopamine effect from? Because imagine if you can just channel all of that into seeking the pleasure of God. And that's what's going to give you the dopamine effect. That's what's going to give you the pleasure. I know it's a bit selfish because you're doing it to get something back, but at least it's gonna
At least you're gonna do some good. At least you're gonna do some good. I mean, yes. I mean, yeah, you can have a more refined and healthier, you're gonna have, and when it comes to greed, listen, uh, sometimes I look at somebody who I really admire, somebody who I really admire, And I say to myself, whatever that person has, I want it too, right? Whatever that person has, that's a kind of greed, right? There's no question that's a kind of greed. I see somebody who has a kind of equanimity, right? They have a kind of calm in difficult situations, and I think, wow, I'm greedy for that. Like I really, if I really want that, and I think that that's legitimate, you
I think
know?
that's okay. And actually, that's how we can be role models for each other. And because people do look up to, you know, others who are being good examples. So let's say a leader who's, you know, a righteous king who's, you know, he's got all the wealth, but actually he chooses to do the right thing with it. And he's not corrupt, he doesn't oppress the people and stuff. So people are going to look at him or her as, you know, a role model and as a good example and want what they have and seek to do that. And if that person then, you know, praises God using their blessings, gifts, talents, and glorifies him despite being in that position, then and you know, spreads that message that the only way to real true success is to, you know, have a relationship with our creator and to be grateful and to help each other, then that's going to help transform the greed of all the people who
Right.
look.
And that's reasonable.
And that's okay. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Right.
So
I think that's healthy. And you know, to be able, again, having extreme, you know, having extreme desire is normal. One of the things that I wish somebody had told me when I was younger, you know, is it that greed is normal, right? That it's the desire is normal. It's nothing to be, nothing to be afraid of, right? We don't have to be afraid of it. We don't have to be, but we do have to learn how to manage it, right? Like almost anything else, we have to learn how to manage it. We have an innate greed for the world, um, this, but at the same time, I'm obsessed with this now because I saw it, the little baby one, so it was very cute. But it's much less cute when you see it in adults, you know, the constant grasping. Um, but uh, but to understand that it can be refined, it can be elevated, it can be and it can be moderated, right? And to find balance, right? It's important to find balance when it comes to success. You know, if you ever want to get a lesson in success, go to a graveyard, right? And look at the stones. Okay? Nobody's income is on their gravestone. Okay? Nobody. Okay? It doesn't say he was super rich. He had a collection of cars. He had, right, um, you know, she had $5 billion worth of jewelry, right? It never says that on the gravestone. Okay? On the gravestone, it says that they were generous. It says gravestone says they were a that they were a good mother. They were a good mother. They were a good wife. They were a good husband. They were a great grandfather. Those are the things that are going to be on your gravestone. Nobody cares, right? At the end of your life, nobody cares how much you had. So for a
that's,
world that's
that's because really inside of us, we all
we
truly
know.
value, we know what we really value is not actually money. It's not, you know, a bigger house, bigger car. So why do we do this? Why do we chase after these things? We know that actually it's not
Right,
what's of worth for a human being. So why aren't we chasing after all the things that we know are good?
right.
Why aren't we giving beyond our needs to those who have less than us in the you know, physical possessions and stuff? Yes, it's okay to be greedy for your needs, and this is part of who we are. We have to survive. It's our survival instinct. You know, we have to get our basic needs. It's important to have you know, if you can have a house and shelter and stay warm from the extreme weather, and obviously your drink and food, enough to keep your body going. But why do you want to keep your body going? It's so that you can use it to fulfill your higher purpose, isn't it, from an Abrahamic perspective, to serve our Creator in this physical world. So part of that is obviously to be use those physical blessings, whatever blessings we have, to show gratitude. And so I think it's so important for us to make time for gratitude, and to make, instead of running after, you know, worldly possessions, let's make time to be grateful. So important. And I think the more grateful we are, either within ourselves, or express this gratitude by sharing our blessings, gifts, and talents to help other people. And the more we do that, the easier it will be as well. It's not an easy thing. If you're a slave of your greed, how do we get out of that? It's not an easy thing. It's not just something that you're gonna,
Right.
do. I mean, maybe you can. I believe you can. You can choose. If you can just make some time to think, well, what is success to me? Is that really success? Why am I doing this? Reflect on it. You might just be able to just transform it and say, right, that's it. From now, I choose not to chase after these worldly possessions for my own purpose.
Right.
I'm going to do it to serve my Creator. I'm going to do it to help other people, or I'm just going to give it away, beyond my needs. I'm going to give it away to the poor and the needy, and I'm going to be grateful for what I have. Because who am I? Am I worth more than somebody else? Am I better than somebody else? Why do I deserve to have 10 houses while my neighbor is homeless? My
Right.
neighbor, well, the person who's out there on the street who
Right.
doesn't even have a house. Why do I deserve to have 10 houses and they don't? Am I better than them?
Right. And that's also a whole different question. I mean, there is a kind of, I would say, like a social dimension to this too. Also, we, I mean, back in the 70s, we had a movement of voluntary simplicity where people sort of said to themselves, you know, like, how much do I really need? And
Question,
is my greed damaging other people, right? It's not just me who's influenced by my greed, but if you have a society, for example, that uses a huge amount of resources for maybe nonsensical things, well, that leads to all sorts of other questions. The question of, like, is that fair? Is that fair? Is that reasonable? Do we want a world in which relatively few people use a huge amount of resources? And do I want to be one of those people? Like, because when I hoard, I keep away from somebody else. And I have to decide whether that's something that I really want to do. And mostly I don't want to do that. So.
and ultimately, we're going to lose respect for ourselves. But after we've spent all that time taking from others, or preventing giving to them in order to take for ourselves, we will, I believe we all have to face ourselves and bear witness to this, what we're doing. And how are we going to, what really? I mean, how are we going to, what excuse do we have for
Yes,
ourselves, against ourselves? Like, what is your excuse against yourself when you're faced with that question? Am I just? Am
yeah.
I fair?
Those are difficult questions. I mean, and yeah, you have to, but you shouldn't wait. People think, "Oh, I'm going to wait, to ask." Don't wait to ask those questions, right? You can ask those questions while you're alive, right? You should
Yeah.
ask yourself every day.
Um,
You turn to yourself and say, am I being just? Am I doing, am I, is my greed, um, is my greed taking away from other human beings? But me, I my method, one of my methods is, I decided what I want on my gravestone, and I did. It says my gravestone will say it says Ish Tam V'Yashar, Ish Tam V'Yashar, which means a simple and straightforward man. Now, I am so far from that now. So, 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 so far from that, but at least I have something to look forward to. So it says I have to somehow get there before I die, because otherwise it's going to be a lie on my tombstone. So it can't be. So that's That's what I'm hoping for. So,
May God grant you a long, happy life.
amen. Amen.
Amen. And guide us all to that straight path, and guide
Amen.
us all to justice and truth and love and peace. And,
Amen.
and to rescue us from our greed, in our selfish greed, really, not completely. Let's just use our greed to serve God as well. We can try and do that.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yes,
Yeah,
please
I'm
do.
learning these things. Like and subscribe, and we'll be back next week.
Okay, thank you for watching, everybody. God bless you. Thank you, Rabbi Wiseman. Peace and blessings. Shalom. Bye-bye.